Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens here with a look at weather across the states and a few other stories around the world. We've got a really pleasant fall day in the eastern U.S. Meanwhile, out west, it is the same old, same old, same old, same old. Just hot, and it's dry, and it's we're seeing some of these fires in Colorado that got ringed by snow, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches back on the 8th and 9th when we had that snow event, and the fires really kind of slowed down. The crews got a good handle on things and got a little additional containment come in, but then you just kind of have to sit back and see, do we dry out? Do we get a little more rain? Do the winds come back? What happens with the fire? And each one is uniquely different. But in some of these, the Cameron Peak fire, in instance, just west of Fort Collins and in the Red Feather area, it's back up, and had a very prominent signature and plume of smoke and so forth as it got very, very active yesterday. You could see that on visible imagery. So the snow was good for a bit of a pause and a little bit of rehydration, but it was not the answer to end all of these fires, even in those states that got hit the hardest, like Colorado and Wyoming, with those particular snow events. So let's come over here to Twitter, and because I've kind of been interested, literally, in the contrast for some time, and the climate crew lambasting aircraft and so forth for what they do, looking at the sky and seeing the trails and calling this carbon pollution. Some of that is true and some of it isn't. They don't know the whole story. As with so many things, we're talking and we're trying to score political points by shaming some politician for flying on an aircraft as they're doing their job. I was just thinking of the primaries that we had just gone through. And ultimately, that has little to no impact on climate. However, the contrail is a different story. This carbon could be absorbed by the plants. If we would just plant trees instead of protesting and complaining, we could have gotten a lot farther along in this journey of regreening the earth. CO2 will do a lot of that by itself. But Airbus is in the process with a couple of these other companies in re-engineering their aircraft to deal with hydrogen. And that to me is just kind of straight up exciting. So they're also working with Magna X. It was an Australian company that relocated 2 years ago to Redmond, Washington. And their thrust was in converting some of these short regional airliners to all-electric propulsion. And I'm all for that, simply because the cost of flying, or at least the cost of operating the aircraft, can go down by 80%. And if you don't have a loud engine up front, but a quiet electric motor turning the propeller, then it's a whole different flight experience. So that this agenda, this transfer from hydrogen and just pure electric in the aircraft is underway, and it's happening at a very, very quick speed. Weaponization of weather. It sounds like a book I should have written about 10 years ago, and we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up on Another Perspective. What a stunning sight. Hundreds of olive redley sea turtles begin to synchronize nesting in the Costa Rican beach, according to Wildlife Refuge. Their vulnerable status comes from the fact that they nest in a very small number of places. And when it's time to lay the eggs, ashore they come. Slow, 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 do the deed. Pile sand back up on the eggs and let instinct, let nature, let the natural processes do what they do. And that's just the time. It's good to give those guys a wide berth, considering the low numbers of those turtles. 8 Greek monks have tested positive for COVID, and so they're isolated. Ashram, their isolated monastery, has been quarantined. Probably not a big deal for them. Kind of like us in this little community, being quarantined is not a big deal. All right, dealing with Beta. I kind of missed the other names. Monday, it's just kind of going to curve along the Texas and Louisiana coastline for a couple of days. It's not terribly strong. We'll look at the latest update just very, very shortly. Hurricane Teddy will build a phenomenal seas across portions of the western Atlantic over the next couple of days. Seas to 19 meters, or about 62 feet, expected Tuesday. And that will pose extreme dangers to mariners. So mariners should take measures to avoid the area. And Teddy's just going to wind up off the coast of the northeastern U.S. As we move from September into October, we tend to get these hybridizations where we have a lot of energy from tropical storms get ejected into the westerlies, into the jet stream, and then that begins to morph out these hybridized storms. There was a movie back in the 90s with Mark Wahlberg, The Perfect Storm, and this was a similar scenario where you had a nice cold early winter, late fall, like a storm coming from Canada. It gets injected with a fistful of tropical energy, and just boom, up she goes. Wow, fall foliage from the arrowhead of Minnesota. And the call was for Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont to match the colors, and they will likely not be more than about a week and a half behind. There's someone else at Jack Sillen also posting how Teddy, as it morphs and gets drawn into the westerlies, will approach the Canadian Maritimes, probably be a big healthy thing. Last Friday we saw some models that were dragging it into down east Maine, but it just doesn't look like it's going to get that far to the south and west, and that is a really, really good thing. Spotify employees employing and demanding editorial side over Joe Rogan. Can you believe that? The dude went to Spotify to avoid the politics, and he's getting it there. So kind of an interesting situation going on in that regard. At least they haven't censored weather yet, although there are calls to do that, believe it or not. All right, National Interagency Fire Center. As of today, we're still on preparedness level of 5, which only makes sense. We still have 78 large fires that have burned 3.9 million acres with 32,000 firefighters. And support personnel are assigned to the wildfires across the West. No new large fires were reported yesterday, and today 43,500 or 600 wildfires. 43,589 wildfires have burned not quite 7 million acres, which is 1 million more acres than burned in the 10-year average. And it's just all to that drought which is in place out west, and it just doesn't look like it's going to get a whole lot of relief. As we look at the 16-day departure from normal on the precipitation, hey guys, Karen, Robin, and Vicky over there, I'm anxiously awaiting the arrival of some storms to come into the west. Maybe a little precip into California at some point during the 16 days. But if you look at the reds and the browns, those are the locations which will receive or are forecast to receive over the next 16 days at or less than normal precip. The darker the brown, the brighter the red, the deeper into the deficit we see. So just in the Pacific Northwest coast, along the BC coast, and at the southeast coast of Alaska, some parts of the Great Lakes states and western New England through the Appalachians. But other than that, there of course is Louisiana. It's just exceedingly dry, and that's a rough forecast considering how dry it's been out west. Temperatures, really no extremes. Today, high temperatures. You can see those ringing where this cool high pressure is settled into the eastern U.S., and those more southerly locations are enjoying some of that cool weather. We had a volcano erupt in Ecuador, the Sangay volcano, asked to 40,000 feet above sea level. This was back on the 20th or Saturday. So a nice eruption there as it blew up, and we see as we get to the tropics, we have the easterlies at the lower directions, and then as you get up into the westerlies, as we pop through the different wind fields, and so that's why we see some part of the plume traversing off to the west, and then the other ejecta heading off to the east. So that is going to be a substantial event in time, and we're seeing more and more of these volcanoes. There's an interesting paper we'll talk about on another perspective coming up, how as we went through the shutdown of the economy, and a lot of the aerosols via the transportation industry not ejected into the atmosphere. And so we saw the climate get warmer because the atmosphere was more transparent. With these aerosols in the atmosphere, it tends to have a cooling or a scattering effect of the radiation coming on into the earth. So as we cooled down, the atmosphere got clearer, you could see fish down there, and the birds came out. The planet got warmer. All right, highest yesterday, 109, 17 miles east of Brawley, California, and 4 miles northwest of Tupac, Arizona, and then 15, 20 miles southwest or west-southwest of Big Piney, Wyoming. BPI is their identifier code. And there's Beta just sitting there, not terribly strong, but it's a soaker. Beta will just be a wet maker as it moves very slowly along the Texas coast. Another little disturbed area with just a minimal chance of formation. Teddy's the one that will combine in the jet stream and roll up to the north And then this area, which is a remnant of Tropical Cyclone Paulette back over the far eastern Atlantic, but this is now, and issues are coming out of Meteorology France. So it's not under the NHC's domain, that area. So that's where that old guy is right there. But it's Teddy. This guy will see just work to the north and really begin to expand its influence. You can see the movement is dramatically accelerated, kind of stationary here yesterday. Over the night, it begins to pick up speed, and now it's been entrained, and its destiny, its fate is met. And we still look at the Texas coast. That is not as impressive as it looked earlier on the water vapor imagery, but you can see the strong easterly on-flow shore winds along the North Texas coast, and then they're offshore as you get on the other side of pretty much Houston Bay, between Houston on the northern portion of here. So that's Texas. Not a lot of sunshine going on there. As we look across the larger part of the nation, all the smoke still in place out west, with one plume across Wyoming and into the Midwest and over the lake states. Clear skies, or brighter blue skies, have now reemerged across Montana and into western Canada, and even over portions of the Southwest. Hey, here in Southern California, I finally have some fresh air. It's been a long haul of it, hasn't it, guys? As you get that southwest wind, you can get those smoke plumes going directly to the north and bring in that fresh air. I think I've got one more out west. Yeah, here's that Cameron Peak fire, and then another one in Wyoming that's really kind of blowing up. I'll open this up. Let's pop over here to Cali. And then look at that. So we still have the fires in the Sierra, still, the lightning complexes north of the Bay Area. Those remain ongoing. Yeah, I see as the day goes on. But if you've got the onshore flow coming from the south and off the west, then the folks inland in the Big Basin can deal with all that smoke, right? They can deal with it. All right, here's temperatures, nice and cool across the northeastern states, 50s and 60s. I'm sure there's so many windows open over the last week that haven't been open for quite some time. And even down into West Texas or West Florida, Pensacola, 69 degrees. And then with Beta down here, a lot of cloud cover, so not getting terribly warm. I know I've got a surface map here. Let's refresh this just so we have the latest one. And you can see the humidity, the higher dew points, just confined to Florida, confined to Louisiana, southern Arkansas, southeast Oklahoma, and Texas itself, and another surge of cool Canadian air. You can see those wind barbs. We zoom on in there, you can see those wind barbs coming in from the northwest. The red digit is temperature. The one underneath it would be the dew point, all in Fahrenheit. And then the solid lines are the pressure lines. It's like a topographical map where the deeper low pressure here. And these are all auto-generated. That's why the lines are kind of wavy and not necessarily smooth. They just run the numbers in. We've got computers that draw all these things. There was a time when I was back in school, it was all done by human beings. And so much of it has been digitized and automated. And it's good. It's good. It serves its purpose. Let's come over here. Let's animate this. Good rain south of New Orleans. Come over here to Houston and then the Texas coast, and we can see that circulation just right through here. So we'll probably see the onshore flow and the rain's going on for hours yet tonight. Let's see if we can't cycle this. Turn that off. Come out of Idaho, where I was looking at the rainfall over the weekend. Come back in here to Texas. And weather stations, add the precip. I'm beginning to see some of these totals. League City, Sugarland, 3, 4 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches along the coast. So even down at a Corpus, 2+ inches. It's wet. It's going to be a wet event. And since we've had 9 of these storms make landfall, 9 of them, there have been a lot of opportunities to really get a good soaking out here. We've done all that, haven't we? There's the rain. There's the national shot. So even I know there's no showers going on in Colorado. It's just too warm. So we could turn off the winter mask here, and it's all going to be green with these kind of temperatures. So what we're looking at, and the primary. Have you learned how to read when a storm is being hit by artificial means? Yes. You can see it on the radar. This is Casey over here in the discussion. When we were doing this show on Friday, we could see it just literally dissolved the rain over Yellowstone. The whole park looked like it was going to get a good soaking, at least a 1/4 inch, and it just a hole opened up and then it fell apart. And there are certain signs in the clouds where you can see that happening. And when there's barely enough moisture in there to hold a cloud, it'll look like a fall streak cloud. Otherwise, it'll then look like Virga, where you've got the rain weeping out of a cloud that at once had a cumulonimbus top. And then I just need to do a whole episode on that, Casey, so we can show you what it looks like on radar, what it looks like on satellite, and then you can begin to spot some of the geometry that controls and holds on to the winds, the ripples and waves in the atmosphere that either push a portion of it along or retard its movement. Both are possible. It just depends on how it's pulsing. It's a fascinating, it's complex, and it takes a bit of an imagination to be able to visualize what's happening. You look at it over and over and over again, and then one moment you'll get it, you'll see it, it'll just be very clear, and then all the other examples you've looked at over the years just then make sense. And this is how it's been hidden from so many for so long. It's in plain sight, but it's a complex program, and since they've been able to get away with it for so long, it's become very, very refined. All right, back to this. Here we are, better than a week out, early next Tuesday, and this ridge is in place out west, but the corresponding action is a deep trough in the Pacific, in the eastern Pacific, and then another one introducing a lot of cool air to the eastern states. All the way down to the Gulf Coast once again, we'll have a cool front that'll likely make it to the Yucatan and probably clear the bulk of Cuba before all is said and done. And it gets reinforced a couple of times. And this would be somewhat typical of a La Nina winter, where the west is just dry. Temperatures the farther southwest you go are very moderate, but it also would sustain the drought that is entering its second year. And this would mean that the rainfall coming this winter would be on the sparse side. There'll be storms. I'm sure that they'll make sure you get one or two really good ones so that those burn scars get soaked, and then we're dealing with a couple of mudslides. That's a very, very real possibility. That's kind of, it would be awesome, wouldn't it? There's so much, and I haven't really talked about it, but we have to, don't we? We have to. All right, I've got to do this here because I got the other show coming up here shortly at 6 o'clock. We'll cover a little bit of news, and we'll talk about climate and some of the whistleblowers that I'll have on the show on this coming Wednesday, because we're not alone. We can understand and see that there's geoengineering going on. So if that is occurring, then what is it hiding? What is it? What is happening behind the veil of geoengineering? And that's where the story lies. Where censorship happens is where the news is occurring that would impact your decision making, and that's what's exciting. All right, guys, I'll kind of see it a little bit. Sure, Casey, I'll let you know it's probably a week away, at least a week away. And because that would take a lot of prep for me to try to get videos in here in the slideshow presentation. And if I'm going to do some, that means I got to sort through a lot of stuff and get it right. All right, guys, I'll see you coming up at 6 o'clock, a show called Developing Trend. And we'll have that at 6, where we'll talk about a few things that are truly, truly important. Most of them have been in the news rather recently, and some of them in the news, but not the news, or at least not the news just yet. All right, guys, I'll catch you tomorrow. Have a great night, and